So could you maybe explain a bit about the post-conflict efforts that are being made in Sierra Leone at the moment and how that impacts upon efforts to tackle climate change?
Okay. Prior to 2008, very little was done about environmental issues, and this is a country that has a long history of extractive industries. It's a mountainous area of West Africa. And in 2008, the government of Sierra Leone enacted the Environmental Protection Agency Act. But they felt that in order to give it the requisite clout, they needed to amend the act. So I'm pleased to say that in 2010, the president himself became the Minister of Environment because he places issues of environment as one of his top priorities. And through the efforts of the government, companies for the first time in the history of Sierra Leone were compelled to carry out environmental impact assessment studies. Hitherto, that was never done. So when we started in 2008, if you can imagine that you only had 2 companies that complied because of their international obligations to comply with environmental impact assessments and to comply with international best practice, and today we have over 100. I think that's a clear indication that there has been a lot done after our conflict. Because Sierra Leone, I'm pleased to say, recognizes that in order to develop, you have got to protect and conserve your environment. And in conserving and protecting the environment, obviously, it's going to help us because of the adverse impacts of climate change.
And why are post-conflict countries particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts?
Well, obviously, there is a huge drift from the rural to the urban areas, and that means pressures on our water resources, pressures on our forests, because the majority of our populace depend on the forests for energy. And when you have such pressures, such drivers, obviously it will have an effect on the impact of climate change. Let's give an example, like the mangroves, for example. A lot of the mangroves areas in Freetown prior to 2008 were just being cut down and people were constructing houses on them. That now there is a restriction by government to do that.
Okay. And do you think that there are certain opportunities in rebuilding that allow for Sierra Leone to become as ambitious on climate change as it has?
Sorry,
do you think that in rebuilding after conflict there are certain opportunities for post-conflict societies to build in climate adaptive or mitigation measures?
Well, yes, because you see, what war does, it reduces you to zero. So you have to go back to the drawing board and literally start all over again. And if you're starting all over again, that is an opportunity now to build in adaptive measures, mitigative measures, and ensure that you put in mechanisms that will lessen the impacts of climate change on your populace. Now, in Sierra Leone, we're talking about climate resilience infrastructure. Prior to 2008, that was never discussed. And now we're talking about ensuring that even when engaging in any government infrastructure, we're integrating environmental impact assessments, we're integrating international best practices in building infrastructure in Sierra Leone, which hitherto was non-existent. So all of those are adaptive measures.
And do you think that the climate measures introduced in Sierra Leone in recent years has helped in its growth in its economy?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. As you know, we recognize there's an interlinkage between, as I said, conservation and protection of the environment and sustainable development. However, you've got to understand that for a majority of the population, their thoughts of benefits, the benefits of the now, the benefits that the mining company will give you, irrespective of where they're going to conduct the activities. So it has been, we have been able to achieve this level of success because of the political commitment, the political will to make it happen. It has involved an enormous amount of outreach, sensitization, education to make our people who were at the time recovering from a war to understand that it's important to conserve forest reserves, for example, even though there were huge amount of minerals under those forest reserves, because we're looking at the long-term benefits. So, as I said, a lot of education, a lot of commitment has made that happen. So yes, absolutely, I would agree with you. I would say we have recognized now that there is an interlinkage between protection and climate change issues.